Don't go anywhere. Hit that subscribe button. Tap the notification bell and be the first to know when we drop a new video. Like and share with your fellow American patriots who love this country. And if you haven't even an American patriot, you're someone who believe and love freedom, love democracy, truth, and don't like corruption, hit the subscription button.
Owner of the Washington Post is one of the billionaires who now lives in abject fear of Donald Trump. The owner of the Washington Post is actually the fourth richest person in the world. And like every fourth richest person in the world, he dreams of becoming the richest person in the world, which could happen if Donald Trump decides to support that billionaire's space exploration company, and if Donald Trump helps that billionaire get an edge in the business development of artificial intelligence. And so the fourth richest person in the world no longer allows the Washington Post to count Donald Trump's lies. During the first Trump presidency, the Washington Post counted 30,573 lies that averaged out to 21 lies a day by Donald Trump. And there were days, remember, when Donald Trump didn't speak at all, didn't post anything at all, like when he had COVID. And that means that there were days when Donald Trump told many more lies than 21. Donald Trump told more than 21 lies this morning when he called into CNBC, as we will hear later in this hour, when we're joined by Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman. And then Donald Trump took some questions from reporters later in the Eisenhower office building beside the White House. And I leave it to you to decide if this was one of the lies Donald Trump told today. Question: were you aware of and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell? Answer: I didn't know about it at all. Nope. I read about it just like you did. The only people who can believe that are the people who believe every word Donald Trump says. The next question was, do you believe that she called into CNBC, as we will hear later in this hour, when we're joined by Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman? And then Donald Trump took some questions from reporters later in the Eisenhower office building beside the White House. And I leave it to you to decide if this was one of the lies Donald Trump told today. Question: were you aware of and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell? Answer: I didn't know about it at all. Nope. I read about it just like you did. The only people who can believe that are the people who believe every word Donald Trump says. The next question was, do you believe that she's credible to be listening to? Your Deputy Attorney General sat down with her recently, to which Donald Trump responded, well, let me tell you, he's a very talented man. The reporter, Caitlin Collins of CNN, repeatedly says, but what about her? But what about her? As Donald Trump rambled on about his former criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, who is now the Deputy Attorney General, who Donald Trump claimed today is respected by everybody. Now, I sat in a courtroom in Manhattan and watched Todd Blanche lose in the one criminal trial Donald Trump has faced, where Donald Trump was hit with 34 guilty verdicts on 34 charges because Todd Blanche was the worst lawyer in that room. So no, Todd Blanche is not respected by everybody. That is another lie Donald Trump told when praising his criminal defense lawyer today. The Trump White House is leaking the possibility through various news agencies that a transcript will be released about her. But what about her? As Donald Trump rambled on about his former criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, who is now the Deputy Attorney General, who Donald Trump claimed today is respected by everybody. Now, I sat in a courtroom in Manhattan and watched Todd Blanche lose in the one criminal trial Donald Trump has faced, where Donald Trump was hit with 34 guilty verdicts on 34 charges because Todd Blanche was the worst lawyer in that room. So no, Todd Blanche is not respected by everybody. That is another lie Donald Trump told when praising his criminal defense lawyer today. The Trump White House is leaking the possibility through various news agencies that a transcript will be released of Todd Blanche's interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. There is no possibility that that transcript will include all of Todd Blanche's communication with Ghislaine Maxwell and her criminal defense lawyer, who is a personal friend of Todd Blanche. As Donald Trump kept rambling about Todd Blanche, and the reporter kept asking, but what about her? Donald Trump ignored that question, what about her, and didn't say a word about Ghislaine Maxwell. This time, Donald Trump did not say, I wish her well, which Donald Trump has said before about the woman who was convicted of recruiting children to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein and sexually abusing those children herself. Tonight, ABC News is reporting, quote, during her 9 hours speaking with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche last month, Ghislaine Maxwell said nothing during the interview that would be harmful to President Donald Trump, telling Blanche that Trump had never done anything in her presence that would have caused concern, according to sources familiar with what Maxwell said. That was obviously the mission Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer embarked on, get Ghislaine Maxwell to say nothing that would be harmful to Donald Trump. And then Ghislaine Maxwell immediately got transferred from a serious federal prison in Florida, meant to house, among others, sex criminals, to the easiest federal custody facility that exists in America for women, which is not meant to house sex criminals like Ghislaine Maxwell. The rules had to be changed by Donald Trump's Justice Department to get Ghislaine Maxwell into that much more pleasant facility that is located in Texas near members of her family. Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers lied today in a motion opposing the release of grand jury testimony in her case. The lawyers made the legitimate point that I've made on this program, that Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal is still pending before the United States Supreme Court. So grand jury transcripts should not be unsealed in a case that could conceivably go back for a retrial. That is a serious legal point. But the lawyers went beyond that and claimed that Ghislaine Maxwell is a scapegoat. That was their word. And that's the word that they want out there about Ghislaine Maxwell. The Maxwell lawyers wrote, when Epstein died, prosecutors from the Southern District of New York pivoted and made Maxwell the face of his crimes. She became the scapegoat and the only person the government could put on trial. This is what Judge Allison Nathan said about Ghislaine Maxwell's own crimes, the ones she committed, when the judge sentenced Ghislaine Maxwell for 20 years in federal prison for the crimes committed not by Jeffrey Epstein, but the crimes committed by Ghislaine Maxwell. The judge said, quote, the evidence at trial established that Ms. Maxwell directly and repeatedly and over the course of many years participated in a horrific scheme to entice, transport, and traffic underage girls, some as young as 14, for sexual abuse by and with Jeffrey Epstein. The judge paused there to stress that phrase, by and with. The judge said, I will pause on those words for a moment, by and with Epstein. It is important at the outset to emphasize that although Epstein was, of course, central to this criminal scheme, Ms. Maxwell is not being punished in place of Epstein or as a proxy for Epstein. Like every other participant in a multi-defendant case, Ms. Maxwell is being punished for the role that she played in the criminal conduct. As to that role, the trial evidence established that Ms. Maxwell was instrumental in the abuse of several underage girls and that she herself participated in some of the abuse. Ghislaine Maxwell was a child molester. That was proved in her trial. During her sentencing hearing, the prosecutor said that the whole sex trafficking scheme began with Ghislaine Maxwell's recruitment of the first girl enlisted into that scheme. The prosecutor said this about Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. They were predators together. They molested kids together. And Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal defense lawyers did not say one word in her sentencing hearing to contradict that statement that the prosecutors made. They heard the prosecutors say that, and they didn't say a word about it. No one stood up in that courtroom for Ghislaine Maxwell to say that she did not molest kids. Ghislaine Maxwell spoke at her sentencing hearing herself, and she did not say that she did not molest kids. She heard the prosecutor minutes before her say that about her, say that she molested kids, and when it was her turn to speak, Ghislaine Maxwell did not dispute that statement, that she personally molested kids, and today her lawyers use the word scapegoat. That's the word Donald Trump is going to use, and that Todd Blanche is going to use if they are scheming to make Donald Trump's wish come true for Ghislaine Maxwell. Donald Trump said he wishes her well. And the man who wishes her well now has the power to pardon her. The man who wishes her well has the power to release her from prison. And if that's what he's trying to do in exchange for Ghislaine Maxwell, insisting that Donald Trump knew nothing about Jeffrey Epstein's raping of children, then Donald Trump will want to claim that she was just a scapegoat, and that is a lie. Donald Trump now likes to claim that he revoked Jeffrey Epstein's membership in the Mar-a-Lago private club that Donald Trump runs, that he kicked him out. Today, the Daily Beast reports that Jeffrey Epstein remained a member of Donald Trump's club for more than a year after he was first indicted on federal charges of sex trafficking in Florida. The Daily Beast reports the president told reporters that he cut ties with Epstein after the pedophile stole female workers from his exclusive Florida members club. But the revelation that Epstein was allegedly still a member of the club 7 years after Epstein poached Virginia Giuffre from the spa at Mar-a-Lago in 2000 raises questions over Trump's version of events. Epstein was a member of the club until October 2007, more than a year after he was indicted and released on bail, according to the Grifters Club, Trump Mar-a-Lago, and the Selling of the Presidency. In the footnotes of their book, the team of Miami Herald journalists Sarah Blasky, Caitlin Ostroff, Nicholas Nahamas, and Jay Weaver reported the authors viewed a membership list showing that Epstein's account had been closed. The book reports that the membership log shows his account at the club was closed in October 2007. So 7 years after Ghislaine Maxwell found Virginia Giuffre working at Donald Trump's spa and brought her to Jeffrey Epstein's house the day that she met her at Donald Trump's spa, 7 years after that, Jeffrey Epstein was still a member of Donald Trump's club. A year after he was indicted, Jeffrey Epstein was still a member of Donald Trump's club. And there is no evidence in the records that Donald Trump ended Jeffrey Epstein's membership, that he kicked him out. That might have been Jeffrey Epstein's own decision to close that membership. Today, the Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, issued subpoenas after they were approved 2 weeks ago by a subcommittee. One subpoena demands the Epstein files from the Justice Department, asking for, quote, all documents and communications relating or referring to Mr. Jeffrey Epstein or Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell, and further relating or referring to human trafficking, exploitation of minors, sexual abuse, or related activity. The committee also issued subpoenas to every attorney general, Republican and Democrat, who served during any of the federal investigations of Jeffrey Epstein, and to every FBI director who served during the federal investigations of Jeffrey Epstein, and to President Bill Clinton, because the subpoena said he traveled on Jeffrey Epstein's plane 4 times, something Bill Clinton has publicly acknowledged, and a subpoena to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is being subpoenaed, according to the chairman's letter to her, because, quote, Ms. Maxwell's nephew worked for your 2008 presidential campaign and was hired by the State Department shortly after you became Secretary of State. That is a much weaker connection to Ghislaine Maxwell than the guy who's in this picture over my shoulder right now, who knows much more about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell than Hillary Clinton ever will.
Yeah, so you have heard that, Lawrence O'Donnell, one of the best commentator and journalists on MSNBC. Lawrence O'Donnell is one of the most truthful reporter when it comes down to delivering facts to the American people and the world. But as you know that how America operates, lies are truth and truth are lies. Under Donald Trump's regime. So the worst child molester in America's history is given special treatment. That's woman to the right, Ghislaine Maxwell. And, Donald Trump is allergic to the truth. Donald Trump cannot speak truth, because anytime he speaks truth, that's the day that he's going to die. And soon after, he's going to be in his 80s. But, man, how someone do something like that? I have listened to an interview with, I was listening to a thing with Donald Trump and Howard Stern. And Donald Trump made a comment about Paris Hilton at the time she was 12. And the man, that kind of statement, only someone who molests children would make a statement like that. So we know that Donald Trump is not innocent. If he was, he would have released the Epstein file. But guess what? He knows that his base, they are all dummies and people who can't think. But I want to see how this is going to work out. You understand? Just hopefully, we'll be able to see the file, the Epstein file. So the hypocrisy of power, why America is protecting Ghislaine Maxwell. Let's stop pretending. We are witnessing not just a political cowardice, but it is a moral decay at the highest level of power. Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted child sex trafficker who lured vulnerable girls into the hands of the monstrous Jeffrey Epstein, is being protected, shielded, moved under the covers of night to a kosher federal prison camp in Texas, where she now lives with more freedom than the survivors of her abuse will ever know. And who's behind this protection? Let's be honest. President Donald Trump was not only friends with Epstein and Maxwell, he floated the idea of pardoning her. He publicly wished her well during her prosecution. Why? What did she know? What leverage did she have? What threats did she possibly make behind closed doors? Why they didn't kill her like how they killed Epstein? Because Epstein did not commit suicide, he was murdered. Based on what his brother and the pathologist says after they did the post-mortem. Now, in 2025, we have our American president who, instead of blowing the lid off one of the most horrific sex trafficking rings in modern U.S. history, has allowed his Department of Justice to play along with this grand cover-up. And make no mistake, it is a cover-up. 9 hours of secret meetings between Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer. I've never known that a president who was arrested and charged of criminality would be able to use his own lawyers to work in government. So it's all a criminal cabal. A sudden DOJ statement that there is no client list and no credible evidence of blackmail. Really. The transfer of a convicted sex predator to a minimum security white-collar prison in clear violation of Bureau of Prison policy. This isn't just about Maxwell. This is about what she knows and who in the halls of government, finance, entertainment, and even religion was buying the children she served up on silver platters. And yet, Congress is silent, quieter than a corpse in a closed casket. We are the so-called Christians, evangelists, of the Republican Party, the same ones who said that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. But Barack Obama have done things which are ungodly by saying, a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. And if a man take it in his rectum is an era. But where are them now? Because if you condemn Obama then, you should be condemning Donald Trump now. And it is factual. Many of the same people who parade their Bibles in public, who rail against drag queens and abortion clinics, who call themselves defenders of children, are now dead silent as a convicted child trafficker is rewarded with comfort and secrecy. Where are their voices now? What kind of person who claimed to follow Jesus Christ, a man who was condemned the abuse of children in the strongest term, could remain silent while the most powerful institutions in America are covering for a woman who sold little girls to be raped? You call that Christian? That's not Christianity, that's complicity. This is what happens when powers protect itself. We are not talking about a single crime. We are talking about a network, a global trafficking operation built on the backs of broken children and maintained by powerful men whose names have not been able to see the light. These are powerful men whose names still have not been released. This is what they are hiding. And what is more terrifying than the abuse itself is the ease with which the system has bent to protect it. DOJ complicit, FBI silent. Wow, what's his name? Cash Patel. And the other guy, Bunjina, what the name? Oh, frauds. They are real frauds. Because they want power. Frauds. They have bent all kind of rules, break all kind of norms to appease this morally bankrupt man. The Bureau of Prisons, defiant of its own rules. Congress missing in action, the media distracted or disinterested, the church morally compromised. As I said before, the reason why people don't go to church anymore because the church cannot be trusted. The church is just a money-making institution that don't care about the poor. They only care about the rich and brainwash the poor to vote for the rich and vote against their own interests. Vote for white supremacy. It doesn't matter where the people turn in the United States of America. They're still going to have a hard time, whether they go left or right. Oppression, social engineering, brainwashing. No truth. There's no honest government in America. Americans deserve better. The victims deserve truth. The people deserve truth. The victim deserve justice, not more betrayal. And our children deserve to grow up in a country that punishes predators, not promote them to minimum security prison where they can enjoy pottery, classes, and sunshine. This moment is a test of whether Americans will sit silently while truth is buried, or whether we will demand answers, demand accountability from those who swore an oath to uphold justice. You know that the millions that voted for Donald Trump, these are people that are morally bankrupt. These people have no decency, ethics, truthfulness, or honesty in them. Not even God. These are soulless people. The dunces of them all in America. They live in the poorest and they live in abject poverty. But they no. Because if Ghislaine, Maxwell can be protected, anyone can be. And if the rape and the sale of children can be erased from public memory by a few press releases and secret meetings, then we are no longer a nation of law. We are nations of shadow. America is falling right before our own eyes because America is a corrupt society. America is always a corrupt society, but now Donald Trump has made it public. It used to hide under the rug, now it's out on the front lawn. So Ghislaine Maxwell transferred to a Texas prison camp, a deeply disturbing symbol of two-tier justice. The recent relocation of a convicted sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell, to a minimum security federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas, is not just a bureaucratic decision, it's a blaring siren warning us of the quiet erosion of justice and the privilege of the powerful. For anyone willing to think critically, this move demands urgent scrutiny and the courage to ask difficult, even dangerous questions. Maxwell, once a gatekeeper to Jeffrey Epstein's twisted empire of elite exploitation, is no mere bystander in one of the most disturbing sex trafficking conspiracy in modern history, she was convicted of recruiting and grooming underage girls, some as young as 14, for the pleasure of Epstein and his powerful friends. And yet, she now resides in a facility designed for non-violent offenders, white-collar criminals, low-level drug offenders, and immigration violators. The stark disparity between the horror of her crimes and the softness of her punishment exposes a deep and troubling fault in our justice system. The illusion of justice versus the reality of power. Why is a convicted sexual predator housed in what inmates and staff describe as a luxury camp with a ton of freedom? Why was she quietly transferred with no prior notification to her victims as required by the Victims' Rights Act? Why has the Bureau of Prison seemingly ignore its own policy that sex offenders must be placed in a low security facility? According to BOP own regulations, individuals convicted of sex crime are not eligible for a minimum security placement without a formal waiver. Who signed off on this waiver? What were the grounds? Why hasn't the public been told? This reeks not just of leniency, but preferential protection and treatment. A meeting shrouded in secrecy 1 week before Maxwell's sudden transfer, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche spent 9 hours in private meetings with Maxwell and her attorney. No official explanation has been offered. No public record of what was discussed. The Department of Justice has simply gone silent. And the timing? Curious. The meetings occurred just days after the DOJ and the FBI issued a statement claiming they found no incriminating client list, no credible blackmail operation, and reaffirmed their conclusion that Epstein died by suicide, in which that's a lie. But that narrative, presented as a final word, ignores the growing mountain of public skepticism, the anomalies in Epstein's death, and the testimony of victims like Virginia Giuffre and the farmer sisters who maintain there was a network, was a client list, and a systemic protection of powerful men. The privileged path of the powerful. Let us compare. Thousands of black and brown women sit in overcrowded, violent prison for non-violent offense. Some for decades. Teenagers caught with marijuana have even given harsher sentences and locked in cages that breed trauma and recidivism. And yet Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman convicted of trafficking children, is given access to hobby crafts, open recreational yards, and relative autonomy in a prison with no perimeter security. Is this justice? Or this is the unspoken rule of elite impunity? The understanding that if you are rich enough, connected enough, and silent enough, the system will eventually reward you for compliance. The message to survivors and the public, to the survivors of Epstein and Maxwell's abuse, this transfer is not just a bureaucratic insult, it's a psychological violence. It says to them your pain is negotiable, your trauma is inconvenient, and your justice is conditional. To the broader public, this move signals that truth may never prevail, where money and influence dictate outcomes. It mocks the principle of equality before law and dare us to forget, to move on, to believe the convenient versions of events. The dangerous cost of apathy. If we allow this to pass without protest, we normalize the idea that some people are simple above the law. We affirm the belief that elite predators will be protected, that victims' voices can be silenced, and that justice is a performance rather than a principle. This is not about Ghislaine Maxwell. This is about every institution that failed the victims, every prosecutor, investigators, politicians, and journalists who look the other way, pat down and stay silent when the truth got too close to power. A call to critical thinking. So ask yourself, why did the Deputy AG Blanche really meet with Maxwell, who benefit from moving her to a low security facility? Why is the BOP violating its own policy? What is the public not being told about the Epstein network? This is a challenge to your critical thinking. Do not take government statement at face value. Do not allow silence to substitute for accountability. The movement of one woman to a soft prison may seem like a footnote, but it may well be the key to unlocking a far bigger story of systemic cover-up. Because in the halls of power, sometimes what is most important is not what is said, but what is quietly swept away in the night. And this is Corruption 101. Have yourself a beautiful day.